Hello everyone. So in this tutorial today, what we are going to be covering is how to deploy a cloud function on REPL.com. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is obviously Timothy Bramlett. I am the co-founder of Stammer AI, and this tutorial in many ways is aimed at our customers because we are developing a functionality where our AI agents can actually call cloud functions. They can call URLs, send data to them, and then get the response back. But you can also use this tutorial if you're just looking to learn how to deploy cloud functions in REPL.com and have them be accessible behind URLs. Now, let's get started and let's talk about why is REPL, or what it used to be, the domain of it used to actually be REPL.it. Why is it called that? Where does that name come from? A lot of people don't realize. What that's referring to actually is something called a REPL, a read, eval, print loop, also called an interactive interpreter. And let me show you what that is because this is something that'll make more sense once you've seen it. This is the shell, right, on this VM. It's actually probably a containerized thing that they deployed for me. But here is the shell. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start up the Python REPL by typing in Python. Now, what this does is instead of running through a script line by line by line, this gives you a loop, a read, eval, print loop, where you can send commands to it in an interactive fashion. So we can type in print hello world, and then we get that back. So that's why this is actually called REPL. Now, the first thing we need to do, right, is you've already seen that I've got this function up here, but I want to show you how I created this. Now, these days, rarely do I actually write code just myself as a human. I will take it and modify it, edit it, but usually I get started with having an AI write the code for me. And so let me show you what I did here. So I said, okay, create a Python function that runs on, well, I said REPL.com that calculates profit, thanks. The transcriber that I was using got that wrong, and of course it says I don't know. I say REPL.it. Then it says apologize for the confusion, and of course it gives me a function, right? Just kind of a what I'll call for this example a raw function. Now this is great, but this cannot be hit up via a URL, right? REPL.com does not provide you that interface automatically like some platforms kind of do, like DigitalOcean. I have a tutorial on using DigitalOcean cloud functions to do something similar. Actually, I believe it's actually the same thing we're doing in that tutorial, calculating profit. But if you take a look at that, you'll see what I mean. They provide kind of an interface that your function can just automatically, pull down the data from an endpoint. So they're abstracting that a bit. REPL doesn't provide that, so I said I want it to be deployed, right? I knew that by saying that, it would explain to it that, oh, we need to use Flask in order to deploy this. And so then let's take a look at that code. It then generated this code. Notice it was trying to return a web page. We don't want that. We don't want a web page. I just said I want it to be simple API endpoint and return JSON. And so then it gave me actually this, which should work. And then I'm new to REPL. Well, at least I've used REPL for years, but I'm new to deploying things on REPL. So I was trying to get it to do it on 80, but apparently that's not what you do. They apparently run it on 8080 and then they map a port to it, possibly. We'll see how that works. But okay, so this is our function that we're going to use. And I'm going to explain, well, everything about how this function works. So this will be a little bit of an introduction to Python in many ways. But my point here is that you can use AI like Claude or ChatGPT to generate this code for you. And you can just tell it what you want, and it will send it to you. And then hopefully with this tutorial combined, you can kind of get this deployed. Okay, let's run through everything this script is doing, and then I'll show you the example. And this is actually running right now. They have a dev version, and then we're actually going to deploy it so that it's live. So the first thing we're doing here is actually importing some libraries that we need from the Python well, I guess Flask is actually technically not the standard library, but we're importing some libraries that we need. So we're importing some Flask stuff that we need. Flask is a web framework, a lightweight web framework for Python that people love to use because it's lightweight. Now, that being said, it doesn't include a lot of what you need in the end. You have to build a lot of that. I mean, there are a lot of modules and libraries that you can use to kind of get started quickly. But yeah, that's what Flask is, a web framework. Then we're importing an OS module. We're setting up the app. We're initializing it essentially. And I know that some of you, I haven't explained Python code in probably 7 years. So forgive me here if I'm abstracting something away. I haven't been a senior developer. I haven't been slinging code for a living for years now. Then we've defined a function called calculate profit here. It takes in revenue, it takes in cost. And this is probably the easiest or the simplest profit calculation in the world, but it'll work for this example, right? You could do whatever you wanted here. You could take this function and you could, call an API to get stock prices. You could embed in here using they have a capability to embed kind of API keys and stuff like that in the environment is what that's called. So let me know in the comments if you guys have any questions about kind of how to do that. I can point you in the right direction. Now, this is some Flask stuff going on here. This is defining a route called calculate_profit, and it only accepts the HTTP post method, this route, but that is kind of what that is doing. And the way that's kind of exposed in Python's Flask is that you create another function, and we're calling it profit_calculator, and then we're getting the data, the data basically from the JSON. So JSON gets passed into this. We're getting it from the request object. I believe it's very similar to Django, if you're familiar with Django. And then this is just some kind of error checking that Claude did. It tends to do this kind of stuff. Maybe not the best thing for an example, but that is some error checking that goes on. Then we're doing a try and accept block, pulling the data from, actually turning it into a float once we have it. Okay. And then here's where we actually call the actual function that is defined up here, calculate profit. The result of that function call gets stored in a variable called profit. And then just like this sounds, we turn it into JSON with this return JSONify. And then that actually gets returned, as you'll see in just a moment. And this here is kind of a Python thing. So it says if __ name equals main. What that actually means is that if this program is being run itself instead of being imported by another library, this block of code will actually run. This defines, This is reading the environment variables and getting the environment variable that's been defined called port, right? If port is not defined in the environment, it is defaulted to 8080. Then we do app.run, which is kind of a Flask thing. It starts it up and lets it run, and it's sitting there waiting for requests, right? And this host means do not bind to only one address, accept connections from 000, basically any address, and then run on the port that was defined here, which is either 8080, or if that port is actually defined in the environment, it will do that. So that's a lot of stuff here. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know in the comments. If not, I will make videos on those individual things. But anyway, hopefully that makes some sense. This is actually running, I believe, right now. We can hit this up, and yeah, actually it's still running. If you want to do this, what did I do actually? I said originally it was stopped, right? So then I clicked run, and it provides a dev environment for you. You can actually get the URL to access this dev environment from right here. It actually tried to hit up the root of this dev environment that it has deployed for us. But of course, we don't have anything at the root, right? If it was at the root, we would get rid of this. We don't have anything there. We have it at calculate_profit. If that doesn't make sense, you'll understand what I'm saying in just a moment. So that's why that's saying not found. What we need to do now is get this actual address that it's running at. This is some kind of magic going on where it's providing a temporary dev URL and then mapping it to our dev instance where we can access it. So what we need to do is copy this. Okay, I've already done this. We're going to go to this online kind of API testing tool that I really like. It's very simple. You'll notice I've already put this in here, but we're just going to do it again. I don't want to type that calculate profit out. So notice I'm just going to paste it right here and then get rid of the extra backslash. This is what we're calling. Note here that if we tried to do this, the mechanics aren't set up for it to actually translate that extra backslash into the proper root. I cannot remember how to do that in Flask. Django kind of handles a lot of that for you from what I remember. But anyway, that's what that is. So basically you have to call it with just the calculate underscore profit. Now we're doing a post request, right? We're not doing a get, we're doing a post request so we can send data in the body of the post request. We're not going to click send yet. I want to discuss this. This is the package, right, that we're sending to it. This is the JSON package. It is essentially a dictionary. We've got one key that is revenue, and that's defined as an integer of 1,000. And then we have another that is costs. That's the other key, and that is an integer of 750. So that is actually what we're sending to this. Now let's send this, and let's see if this still works. It should. We're going to click send. And of course, we get back the exact same answer. Let's change this just a bit, 2,000, to make it a little more interesting. And there we go. So this is working properly, and this is actually running in the dev environment. Now, if we were to leave this, this web page, well, not this one, but if we were to leave this web page, I believe this environment would collapse and not work anymore. So what we need to actually do is deploy it. Now, I haven't done a ton of deployments on REPL, so you guys will let me know in the comments if I'm getting anything wrong here. But REPL.com seems to be the easiest way we have found to deploy Python code quickly in the cloud. You can check my tutorials. There are cheaper ways to do this, not necessarily as easy though. So this plan that I actually literally had to sign up for today in order to make this tutorial was $25 a month. It does go down to $10 a month, which is a pretty big savings if you sign up for yearly access. So on a yearly plan, very cheap. On a monthly plan, not quite as cheap, but still a great value. So let's go ahead and click deploy. We are actually going to click redeploy because I've already done this once. And what I am actually going to do here is the deployment status bar. When you first deploy this, it's going to go a lot slower. I was actually super surprised by how slow it was. Also, one thing I do want to mention under the resources here, where is that actually? Yeah, here we go. When I initially deployed it, I defined the resources to use. And by default, it was doing something ridiculous, like 4 virtual CPUs, I think 8 gigabytes of RAM, which used up more compute units, I guess is what they call it right here, compute units. I think it was 88 that it was using originally. For something like this, not going to have a high amount of traffic. I just lowered it to 1 virtual CPU. Half a gig of RAM is fine for this use case. So just keep that in mind. Let's go back and see what's going on here. Okay, so it's been deployed. What this means is it's live, it's running now in some type of container, most likely. And once we leave this, it's not going to go away. Interestingly, it will auto-scale. Now, we set the max auto-scaling is what I was talking about, this 1 virtual CPU, so it shouldn't be going over that. Now, let's copy this URL. We're just going to do this. Of course, once again, I mean, there's nothing at the root, right? So it's going to say not found. And then we're just going to go right back to our API testing tool. And we're going to turn it to a production link. This is not really production for one reason. Although for this kind of thing, it's honestly fine. Now let's just make sure this works. Everything else should remain exactly the same. Just change this just so that we see a visual change happen. There we go. So that is still working. Now, you're going to see a warning here when you deploy this in this way that it's not, or sometimes you will, I guess I'm not seeing it here, that it's not really, that this is a dev server and not really meant for production environments. That is true. For something like this, probably not a big deal. Now, if you were going to set up some endpoint that needed to handle a massive amount of traffic, you might want to engage with a developer in order to kind of help you get this figured out and deploy it behind a real kind of web server. I don't know a ton about deploying production Flask applications. Actually, nothing now that I think about it. But I know a ton about Django, which is very similar. And so you'll need to deploy it behind a real web server, most likely Nginx or Apache, and then use kind of a gateway in order to interact with the Python code. But that's a bit beyond this tutorial. I can always make a tutorial on deploying Python applications in the cloud if anybody's interested, so let me know. But this is really it for this tutorial. And you can see the possibilities here, right? Let me show you if there's, do I know how to actually, let's see, there is a way to, oh yeah, here we go. Edit commands and secrets. So you could do a lot more than, have a profit calculator in here. You could do some crazy cool stuff like, embed API keys through this edit commands and secrets. You could, yeah, here you go. You could add a deployment secret in here that is an API key that calls another API. You could use it to get stock information. And then for our Stammer customers, what this allows you to do very soon, this is live in production now, but it's in active development, so it may not work. And it may change over time, but what you could actually do is connect your AI agent to the results of this endpoint and instruct it that, hey, when a customer comes and chats with you and wants to know the stock prices, you can call this endpoint in order to get the stock prices and return to them that information. So this opens up all kinds of use cases, all kinds of capabilities. I hope this tutorial was valuable for you. As I was saying, let me know in the comments if you have any questions at all. I am not looking to become a consultant here. However, I will try my best to point you in the right direction. That's it for this video. Thank you so much, and please subscribe if you want more tutorials over things like this.